Welcome to the podcast. I'm Karen Weaver. Today we're tackling the evolving world of college athletics. My guest is the legendary John Canzano, a reporter and radio host from the West Coast. John's career has given him a front row seat to the conversations happening at the highest levels of college sports, university presidents. We're digging into the major shifts, like the move from an academic-driven model to a business-focused approach powered by massive TV deals. We'll also explore the potential split between football and basketball, the impact on Olympic sports, athlete unionization, and the challenges university leaders face in balancing financial pressures with their academic missions. This is a conversation you won't want to miss. John, so glad we could finally connect. Give me an update on what's going on.
Well, I mean, look, college athletics has been dumped on its head in the last year and a half, and higher education is in a tug of war with college athletics itself. There's a lot of questions on campuses about whether athletic departments should be run as businesses and not be part of the rest of the university or not be subject to a lot of the parameters that, the deans and provosts and certain departments are subject to. And so it's a big debate. And I think the part of the problem is that you have, 130 plus schools that are playing college football, and they're not all the same. And so, and college football is what drives the bus on these deals. So I think you've got just a really tricky landscape, and you've got academics running the universities who are used to sort of leading with, consensus and being very collegial and inclusive. And that's not how big business is done. And so I think we're watching, a real tug of war going on.
When you talk about what presidents are telling you, what are they interpreting from the landscape that they personally need to do to change their behaviors?
Well, I think they're recognizing that the athletic department is very different than any other department on their campus. And, for years, university presidents, viewed that athletic department as kind of like the toy factory on the campus. And, that's where they're having fun. We're doing the serious work in science and in our law school and in the engineering department. Of course, you're doing big things there. But over time, what happened is, the infusion of television money into college athletics changed the narrative and changed the scope of what was happening. And suddenly the distributions that were coming from these various power conferences were not a couple $1,000,000 a year. Now we're looking at, $70 million, $60 or $70 million a year per school being distributed through the media rights deal in the Big Ten conference. And all the way down to, some conferences that are only getting 2 or 3 million per school. So it's just, they became huge revenue generating machines. Frankly, if you look at an athletic department, if it's a business, and it has 20 different locations, meaning 20 different sports, only 1 or 2 of those locations is profitable. Like, you wouldn't run any business reasonably that way. So I think the mindset shift from the university presidents has largely been, hey, I need to recognize that this revenue generating machine that really is forward facing in the front porch of the university, that does a lot of the work for branding and marketing, that thing is important and needs to be treated as a different animal. So I also feel that, I've talked to a lot of university presidents who say that, what we see happening flies in the face of higher education. And I think presidents will publicly say, hey, these are great new connections we're making. The Big Ten's taking schools from the Pacific time zone, and we're really going to do some things together academically. You can say that all you want, but we all know that, the university systems have largely been regional and for a reason, so they can work well together, being in regional proximity to each other. So it's just created some complications. And, the university presidents have ceded control of those conferences now to former TV executives and marketing experts and people who are working in the corporate world, and those commissioners of those conferences have ceded control to the television networks. And so we're really at this tipping point where we're watching college athletics change forever. It's certainly lost some innocence, and we're seeing university presidents who have largely been promoted and escalated through the university system because they're very collegial. They make bulletproof decisions, consensus builders. We're seeing those people now being thrust into a position of being visionary and being an entrepreneur and thinking more entrepreneurial. And so I think it's a real challenge.
Such good points. And one of the things that I wanted to ask you is, I hear oftentimes about athletic conference affiliation being part of your peer group, your peer network, if you will. Have you heard presidents talk about that recently?
Yeah. John Carl Schultz, the president at Oregon, when I went and visited him one-on-one, I was really curious to see how he would sort of frame, the relationship with the Big Ten schools like Ohio State and others. And, he's an economics guy, right? He's a business person. And he, as a former professor, talked about kind of some of the things they could do together. And, in some of the classes that maybe they were offering at Oregon that only attracted one or two students, now suddenly you could go, hey, there are one or two students on, 18 different Big Ten conference campuses that want to take this class. And gosh, we could do a class, as a group. And so I think they're trying to tap into that stuff. They're trying to work around the obvious geographic issues that they have created. The truth is, football is driving all of this. And, if the TV networks had wanted more regional conferences, the university presidents would be selling the idea that regionality is where it's at. So, yeah, I think it's a system that's been forced upon the presidents, and they're working within it and looking for advantages that they can sell publicly. But the truth is that, I think a day is coming when college football splits off altogether. It becomes more like professional football, and maybe, the academic, mission and the athletic mission can grow closer in alignment when you bring those Olympic sports back to your campuses and more regional competition. Because I just don't know how it's good for students anywhere to be sitting in airports on layovers, traveling across the country. The Washington football team played a game at Rutgers in New Jersey on last Friday. It was a night game. They got home after 4:00 in the morning, and they're doing it with a charter. So imagine volleyball, softball, women's basketball. Some of the sports that aren't going to have charters available to them, I think, are going to spend a lot of time not in their classroom, and I don't know how that fits with the mission.
Right with you on that. One of the things that I wonder about is, okay, we can say that college football should break away, but what about college basketball? Don't you think they're going to want to go too? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's the next domino, and everyone's talking about it. And a great case study right now is the Pac-12 conference. They added Gonzaga, and now they still need one more member to get to the requisite 8 full-time for all sports members that the NCAA requires. They're one short. They're kind of kicking the tires on a few options, but they decided, instead of continuing to kick the tires, they're going to go right to market with their media rights. And I do expect that they're going to try to be really creative in splitting away basketball, much in the same way that the women's basketball tournament wanted to negotiate its own rights, much in the same way that we saw the WNBA go out and say, hey, we're worth more money now than ever. I think college basketball knows that there's some room for growth there and some room for revenue. Football feels tapped out right now between all the TV deals that went down with the contracts and then the college football playoff negotiation that they extended for 7 years. And so I think basketball has the most room for growth. I think you're right. When I mentioned those 20 franchises you have on the campus, there's only 2 that make money. It's football. About 80 cents of every media rights dollar goes to football, about 20 cents to basketball. I think the basketball people would like to push that towards 25 or 30 cents on the dollar. We'll see if they can get there. There's going to be an expansion to the NCAA tournament. Certainly, there's a ton of interest in basketball, but you can see what the Pac-12 is doing. Pac-12 has put Gonzaga with San Diego State, with Utah State and Colorado State and Boise State, and they're looking and going, hey, wait a minute, 6 of the 8 members right now went to the NCAA tournament a year ago. I mean, they are creating a basketball renaissance in that conference, and they're going to try to go to market and sell it. So pay attention to that. What kind of deal do they get? Are they able to really monetize basketball? If they can, basketball might not be far behind it. But I really worry, to your point, your question, I really worry about the Olympic sports. I worry that you're going to see, athletic departments begin to tier their sports within the athletic department and say, gosh, well, we're fully funding football. We're all in with the maximum number of scholarships, and we're fully funding men's basketball. And because of Title IX, we'll continue to fund women's basketball and women's track and field and golf and whatever, volleyball. But on the men's side in the Olympic sports, I think you're really in trouble because, the feeder programs for the United States Olympic team, it's not like we have these great Olympic academies all over the country. We have universities that have been feeding Olympians into the Olympics. More than 90 medals were won by Pac-12 athletes in the last games, 95 plus in the games before that. I kind of wonder what happens when you start busing and flying your athletes all around the country, when you start to go, hey, we're less regional, and guess what? We're less invested financially in these sports. When that happens, I think you risk a big fall off, and you risk, the detriment of the United States Olympic training programs. And I've covered 5 Olympics in person, and I was in Beijing, and I saw their academies. They are built to take kids out of their family structure at the age of 9, 10, 11, and put them with the best trainers, the best nutrition, the best coaches. They're trying to create, great athletes, and they've been successful to some extent. You see how China registers in the medals table during the Olympics, but United States has leaned into the college programs and said, hey, develop our athletes, develop our volleyball players, develop our basketball players, and I really worry that one of the byproducts of what we're seeing now is going to be for 8 years, 12 years from now. I'm watching closely. Are we as dominant in the Olympics compared to the globe, the global scale, as maybe we once were? Or will there be some fall off? And will there be some athletes who are European athletes who have jumped on planes and come to the United States because they can go to Stanford and they can play, Olympic sports, or they can go to Cal and play Olympic sports? Are those athletes going to continue to come to us as a country? I don't know. And if they don't, I think it's part of the failure of, the NCAA and the collegiate system.
So do you find presidents thinking about, if we do this, we break away football, how the heck an athletic department would be run when you have a professional model sitting on one side and everybody else is some degree of amateur, less funded, more funded? I'm trying to imagine what that structure looks like.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out, is it healthy or not? But part of the thing that's mixed up in all of it is, we're moving towards a system where the athletes are going to unionize at some point. They are going to collectively bargain. They are going to be treated like professionals. I mean, we essentially have unrestricted free agency right now with name, image, likeness in the transfer portal and nobody under a contract. I mean, it's wild. You have players who are leaving their teams 4 games into the season saying, hey, I didn't get what I was promised. And, I want to maintain my redshirt year, so I'm going to sit out. Luckily, the NCAA has a rule that says you can't play for more than one school in the same season, or I think you would see that. So, yeah, I think there's a real issue. And I think the presidents, for now, have largely been driven by the idea that a lot of the decisions they've made are financial no-brainers. If you're being offered $70 or $60 million to go to the Big Ten versus $30 million in the Pac-12, that's not a hard decision to make. But I think we're starting to see more and more of these dilemmas present themselves. Memphis is a great case. Memphis has got a great basketball tradition, obviously located in Tennessee, not a great geographical fit for the Pac-12. And yet they're one of the schools that the Pac-12 is considering. And they're trying to figure out, does it pencil? Like, does the cost of travel, does that pencil out when you factor in the media value of Memphis in a market there that has great viewership? So there's a real sliding scale, and the numbers are starting to get a little more complex, and the equations aren't as simple as they were maybe even a year ago. And so I think more of that is coming. And yes, if football splits away, who pays for it? Who pays for the Olympic sports? It is a valid question. And, I think one that the presidents, I'm watching some presidents retire right now. I've talked to a couple who are, about to retire. And I think, they're kind of expressing that, they want to leave the university better than they found it. They want to tie up some of this confusion or maybe some of the loose ends. But they also, I think, are looking deep into the horizon and going, I don't think I want any part of that, because it's the same calculus that I think college coaches are making. We're seeing some really good, successful coaches. David Shaw at Stanford, great example. Chris Peterson before him at Washington. Chip Kelly at UCLA. Successful head coaches who have gone, this isn't for me. I'm going to do something else. And Chip Kelly gave up a head coaching job to be an offensive coordinator because he just wants to coach again. And, David Shaw walked away at Stanford. He had a great job, one of the best jobs in the country. And, Chris Peterson said it's just too much, and is looking now at name, image, likeness and the transfer portal and going, it's not the same job that I left years ago.